What's up, Ego Hackers? Welcome to Season 12, Part 2, how to gain the social skills and develop your social skill set, how to avoid social faux pas for the 16 types. And today's type we're going to be discussing is the ISFJ archetype, the common mother-in-law archetype, which is pretty rough because that's been my experience my whole life, because almost every mother-in-law I actually have is an ISFJ, or at least in my case, maybe an IFJ, but apparently I seem to collect them. I can't get away from it, you know. But it's really interesting because I kind of end up enjoying the same kind of woman over my life, and they all have the same kind of mother, and then it just starts getting to the point where you start thinking that maybe personality type has a lot to do with the types of children that are born. Maybe there's a way to anticipate it or figure it out as a result, which I think so. I believe there is. For example, ESTPs often have INTJ children, and INTJs often have ESTP children. It seems to be like something that's really consistent over time. March has been a crazy month for me, March 2024. So, and yeah, I mean it's because I got married, and that's why. So, but I'm still here, contrary to popular belief. So anyway, social skills. What ends up becoming the problem with social skills? ISFJs lacking in social skills? Say it isn't so. That's not a thing, right? It is a thing. It's actually a really big thing, consistently. Very big problem. You know, it's so funny because like SFJs oftentimes believe they have social mastery, especially like, for example, ESFJs, but ISFJs, especially ISFJ women, seem to think that they're the masters of all things social, and then this what leads them to utilize their ENTP subconscious to become master manipulators. Some of the biggest social manipulators that we've ever seen or we've ever known, etc. Be that as it may, like TI child God complex continues to still be like an issue, even among ISFJs. I mean, we talked about this with INFJs a little bit, but from an ISFJ perspective, it really is an even worse situation because ISFJs literally think that they are the pinnacle or the masters of not only just knowing social norms, but enforcing social norms. They're like these social enforcers of society. They're the ones that enforce tradition and force other people to live by tradition. Even though sometimes you see ISFJs hypocritically breaking tradition themselves, but yet forcing other people to live by tradition. And the reason why is because ISFJs oftentimes are projecting their comfort zone onto everybody else. And they don't even realize it. They don't even realize how other people are reacting negatively to that point of view, or reacting negatively to how they're acting. And that's horrible. It's very horrible. I have been the victim many times of ISFJs lacking in social skills. They oftentimes force religion down my throat. They oftentimes force spirituality down my throat that I never asked for. Spirituality or religion that they themselves never actually verified, okay? And it just ends up being like, their TI child mixing in with their SI hero doing their cognitive looping and whatnot, which ultimately leads to them committing like the biggest social faux pas within the context of their life, and then also causing insane damage to other people in their life. And it ends up getting worse and worse and worse because little do they know that when they do this, their extrovert intuition inferior is actually creating bad futures for other people. Because what they're doing is that they are essentially forcing other people through their extroverted sensing nemesis to live their own comfort zone. This is how one of the types who claims to be the least selfish of us all is actually one of the most selfish of us all, because they are consistently projecting their comfort zone onto everybody else. Not unlike an INFJ projecting their freedom of choice onto everyone else. And like even being okay with other people making bad choices. Because they want to know it's okay for them to make bad choices because cognitive origin of justification, within the soul temple. Okay, yeah, we get it. We've heard it. But from an ISFJ point of view, that's not necessarily the case. Not really. It's not good. Not good consistently. You know, no one can tell, like, deep down the surface, you know, ISFJs, they're like the biggest party animals. Most people assume it's the ESFP that does that. But the thing is that the ESFP is not the one putting on the party. Oftentimes, it's actually the ISFJ that's actually putting on the party, just so they can make their ESFP shadow happy, where they can be like, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. Well, they're taking advantage of that vainglorious, deadly sin, essentially. And, you know, since they're being all vainglorious, you'd think that they're actually increasing their social status, when in the reality of the situation, people are just taking advantage of them. Their vainglory is being taken advantage of. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening over and over and over and over. And this is basically how ISFJs end up forming attachments instead of bonds. Because ISFJs actually care way more about how they look, you know, compared to INFJs. ISFJs are actually far more sensitive to being embarrassed, right? Because, again, they're projecting their comfort zone. And in projecting their comfort zone onto other people, they're doing it because oftentimes they're avoiding embarrassment. I don't know how many times I've heard ISFJs in my life tell me how much of an embarrassment I was to them. Or how I'm dishonoring them. Or dishonoring their family on a regular basis. Even though I'm the one person that if they call me, I'm going to drop everything for them. I'm the one person that if they actually express to me a problem, I'm going to solve that problem. You know, 2 summers ago, for example, 2 summers ago, my father disowned me. 2 summers ago. This is the 3rd time in my life that he has disowned me. The 3rd time. And oddly enough, I believe very soon he'll probably do it a 4th time, actually. I think that there's a good chance he'll do it a 4th time this summer. I believe it's actually going to occur in the month of June this year. And I'm not trying to say there's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm actually going to be working very hard to make sure that he doesn't disown me. However, expert intuition here is like, yeah, he's still going to disown me. So it is what it is. At least I can walk away from that situation with confidence, knowing that I did my best, right? I did my best. As best as I could within the circumstances that, you know, I could do that. Of course, he does this, you know, under the influence of an ISFJ, of course, because, you know, in his words, Chase, you're just too unpleasant to be around. Why is that? Because I tell the truth. Because I expose bullshit, right? Because I'm not willing to play the little social political games, especially when I know that I personally don't benefit when I play those games. You know, what's a man supposed to do in that situation? What is a man supposed to do, right? So cognitive looping basically ends up meaning that the parent function is basically not being used properly. These people who should have social mastery, who should have social responsibility, end up not having any at all, basically. And what they end up doing is actually causing other people around them to become emotionally unintelligent, right? You know, it's so interesting, people talk about emotional intelligence, and when you look at the ISFJ archetype, man or woman, it's that archetype's job to enforce social norms in such a way where they are increasing the emotional intelligence of other people. In fact, actually today, I have a very important ISFJ in my life. When I got upset at a mutual friend of ours, basically, for making a mistake. And he basically told me that I was being emotionally unintelligent about the situation, and I need to zoom out a little bit and be patient and take a look at what's actually going on. And sure enough, he was right. And he upgraded me, and he helped me understand that I need to be more emotionally intelligent in this certain area in my life. See, that's an ISFJ that's doing their thing. They're doing their purpose. They're doing it right. They're social enforcers because it's their job to increase the emotional intelligence of other people around them consistently. It's their job. It's absolutely their job. This is one of the reasons why the ISFJ archetype has the reputation for being the most nurturing of the 16 types, especially among women, That's why the ISFJ archetype is actually considered to be the absolute most feminine and the most attractive, naturally attractive female archetype out there, to the point where, in my opinion, men commit to ISFJ women more than any of the other 16 types. Now, of course, there's a bias there because ISFJ women are actually probably the most common woman out there, archetypically anyway. So there's like a bias there. But the point is, though, is that ISFJ women in general are actually very desirable. And that's why. They upgrade the emotional intelligence of children, for example, through their nurturing behaviors. But sometimes their ego investments get in the way. Sometimes they think of themselves more highly than they ought to, and they give in to the pride of the TI child, and they end up having TI child God complex, and they literally think that they are the arbiters of what is normal. Because the ISFJ is projecting their comfort zone, the ISFJ ends up believing through their extroverted thinking trickster that their comfort zone equals normal. And not just normal for them, but normal for everybody, such that everybody who doesn't fit that comfort zone is not normal and should be judged accordingly. The biggest social faux pas of the ISFJ. And oftentimes, the actual bane of my existence. Probably the one area of my life where I draw the most suffering. As you folks are aware, my mother, I have suffered in this way under my mother because she doesn't know what she's doing. Just like Jesus said when he's been nailed to the cross and he says, quote, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." My mother certainly does not know what she does. So I forgive her. I forgive her. I forgive her. And I love her. But that doesn't change reality. Because the reality of the situation is that at the end of the day, you know, we all have to take responsibility for our actions, including the social faux pas that we actually create and the social faux pas that we actually do. So what's causing the social faux pas within the ISFJ? Why are they projecting their comfort zone onto other people? That's right, extroverted thinking trickster. Have you noticed something about ENTP subconscious? It's very presumptive. It's actually more presumptive than an ENTP ego, I've noticed. Very presumptive. The reason why is because the ISFJ lacks the life experience of what it is to be an ENTP. So when they're cognitive transitioning, they're aspiring into their ENTP side. And when they aspire, they're at high risk of being presumptuous, especially in their youth, because they have not spent as much time in their brains in their subconscious. And because they don't have as much time, they don't have as much experience, they don't have as much practice. So they need more practice in order to prevent this problem. But ENTPs, the ENTP archetype naturally is very presumptive. So they start presuming. They start presuming that everybody else around them knows what constitutes normal, which is why they feel justified in what they call enforcing social norms. When the reality of the situation is they're actually enforcing their own comfort zone. They're not actually enforcing true social norms. They're enforcing projections, their own projection, cognitive projection, their own self. We as a race are very solipsistic. We think of ourselves first before we think of others. That's what happened. That's absolutely what happened. Realize this, ISFJs. Realize that this is what you do to people. Realize is that this is how you actually increase the suffering in the world, because you are projecting your comfort zone onto everybody else, because you assume that everyone else is on your side. You assume that everyone else thinks just like you do, which is the problem with TI child God complex, assuming that everyone else thinks that way. And then, in its hubris, eventually, you all start to believe that everyone else should think that way. You assume that your children should think that way. You assume your husband should think that way. You assume your wife should think that way. So at least with ISFJ men, their masculine idealism, their masculine altruism, they can learn lessons about this and actually grow out of this very rapidly. But the ISFJ woman, with her inferior judgment and high amounts of superior perception, well, she has a very hard time getting out of that rut. She needs to be led out of it by a man that she trusts. To be led out of that poor social behavior. If you're a man, you're getting in a relationship with an ISFJ woman, you need to understand these risks. These are extreme risks. Because that is what is actually normal. That ISFJs cognitive loop like this and project their comfort zone, and they presume that their comfort zone is everyone else's comfort zone. They presume that everyone else is on their side. And for some reason, nobody has the heart to tell them. Why? Because they're demon. NI demon. Where they are willfully choosing. The NI demon is willfully choosing to be vindictive. Okay? Their INTJ shadow, or superego, absolutely loves to punish other people that don't fit their presumptions, that refuse to accept their comfort zone as the norm, as the social norm. So when they're enforcing their comfort zone and masking it with their ENTP subconscious as normal, as what should be the norm when they are really, really deep into their hubris with TI child God complex, then if people do not comply with them, their next instinct is to use NI demon to punish those people who do not comply. Tell me, do you think they're actually going to get anywhere socially in life when that happens? Do you really think that? Do you honestly believe that ISFJs will actually have people who want them? I keep hearing ISFJs over and over and over throughout my life complaining over and over and over about how they are not invited to things, about how no one chooses them, about how they are consistently dejected over and over, how they are consistently being used by other people. It's because they don't know just how alienating they are. Because they imagine to themselves that their SI hero is God's gift to comfort. They can make themselves comfortable in some really bad situations. They believe they have mastery over what is safe, over what is comfortable within their own comfort zone. But what they don't understand is that their comfort zone is for them and them alone. It is not for other people. It's one thing to want to share your comfort zone with others, and share your comfort zone with your children, and share your comfort zone with your husband, and share your comfort zone with your wife. It's one thing to do that. The people in your immediate family, that's okay. But even then, your comfort zone may not be them because your children are not ISFJs. And even then, other ISFJs may have a different definition, TE Trickster, of what their comfort zone is. So in reality of the situation, your comfort zone at the end of the day only applies to you. And what you should only do is share pieces of your comfort zone instead of forcing your comfort zone in its whole form down someone's throat and then punishing them if they do not comply. No wonder you ISFJs do not have a social life. No wonder ISFJs in general end up being antisocial. And it's not because they have a choice in the matter. They want to be social. They choose to be social. But the reality of the situation is, okay, that they still make the wrong decision. They make these wrong decisions. I'm going to force my comfort zone down these other people. And you know what's really, really ridiculous about them? Is that ISFJs are not conscious that they do this. Why? Because they do it with their extroverted sensing nemesis, which is in their unconscious. So they're really actually, they are not even conscious that they are abusing people in this way. They are not even conscious that they are moving people in this direction. Like at all. They're not conscious of it. You know, really sad. Really, really sad. They're not even conscious that they're abusing other people. They're not even conscious that they are creating their own social faux pas. They have no idea that they are forcing other people to not want them, which is forcing them in this position of being antisocial because no one wants to hang out with them. No one wants to invite them to anything. No one even considers them a choice. And they get hella depressed. And then they start to blame other people, even though they're not conscious of the amount of damage that they've caused other people. They are not conscious of it. And it just grinds my gears. I am so angry about this. I'm in the heart temple with them. I care very much about acceptability, cognitive origin of reverence. They like being revered, right? But they don't. They don't actually be revered. That's the problem. They want to be revered, but they can't because they're not conscious of shoving down their comfort zone down other people's throats consistently. And because of that, they become abusive, and it's wrong. It's wrong if they do this. So what's the solution? We've identified the problem. What's the solution? Extroverted feeling parent. Actually being responsible as a parent function. That actually understands that when your environment changes, when the culture changes, when the setting changes, when the people change, when the nouns change, the persons, places, and things around them change, so also do the social norms. They don't have mastery over the social norms. The truth is that social norms have mastery over them. The social norms are shaping their comfort zone. So what they have to do is that they have to be willing to navigate and explore all these different social norms and all these different social settings instead of being stuck in their comfort zone. If they have a very diverse comfort zone because they're using their extroverted feeling parent to actually look at other people's values, different value sets, different religions, different spiritualities, different faiths, different customs, different traditions, and they experiment with their ENTP subconscious, all of these different customs and all of these different things, guess what? Guess what? You know what will happen? You know what will happen? Well, they will absolutely get to a point where all of a sudden they have such a variety and they've tasted everything. They realize, oh crap, I should not be forcing my comfort zone on other people. I should not assume that my comfort zone is the social norm, because they can't. They can't assume anymore. They have tasted the fruit of everyone around them consistently and opened themselves up. Instead of being closed-minded with T.I. Child, they have opened themselves up. They've allowed themselves to have an open mind with extrovert feeling parent. But it's hard for an ISFJ to do that because ISFJs have extroverted intuition inferior. And they are afraid of new. They are afraid of things that are not familiar. They're afraid of the unfamiliar. But their extroverted feeling parent, in order for it to become responsible, it has to become familiar. They have to allow themselves to be familiar with other people's values, other people's principles, other people's traditions, other people's customs, basically. And then maybe they actually allow other people, through open-mindedness, to behave as they are. Because they're adding other people's customs, traditions, spiritualities, principles, and their way of things, being open to add them to their own self, to add them to their comfort zone, such that the ISFJ becomes comfortable with allowing people to be people, and allowing other people to act as they are, instead of forcing everyone else to live exactly the way that they do. It's really frustrating. They shouldn't do it. But they keep doing it. Over and over and over. ISFJs, you want to have a social life? This is what you got to do. The key to your social life is this: open-mindedness, and experimenting with other people's belief systems, and experimenting with other people's traditions and customs, and actually trying it on and trying it out. Try everything, okay? Stop limiting yourself. I get that your NI demon is very risk averse, but you got to start taking risks by opening yourself up to things you are unfamiliar with, so that your extroverted feeling parent is utilizing enough input for you to be making proper decisions towards other people socially in your life. stop being judgmental towards how other people act, because there is likely reasons why people act that way. Sure, there's unreasonable people, but you can't imagine to yourself that you're the only reasonable person, T.E. Trickster. Because the reality is, ISFJs, you are actually the most unreasonable because of T.E. Trickster and your SI hero. Mixed together, you are the Trickster hero who is the actual most unreasonable of the 16 types. Therefore, go out with people and ask them how they do things. Ask them why they do it. Find out. Have an open mind. So then you can test and approve. For example, it is written, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know, having an open mind, trying out new things, engaging with the unfamiliar, so that you can test and approve what God's will is, His good, perfect, and pleasing will, for example. I'm just using this just as an example. If you're able to do this, you'll realize very quickly that you don't actually know what you're talking about, that you don't know anything. So what business do you have enforcing social norms that just match your comfort zone and projecting your selfish, solipsistic behavior onto other people, when the reality of the situation is you should just be open? Okay? Who elected you the judge? James chapter 4 says in the book of James, written by the ESTP, the brother of Jesus, the brother of Isa, probably one of the most uncorrupt documents in the Injil. You might want to pay attention to that, Muslims, if you're watching this. James, the ESTP, he says, who are you to judge your neighbor? Because, you know, when you judge people, you're not upholding the rules. You're not upholding the law. You're just sitting in judgment over it. But there's only one judge, the one who has the power to save and destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? People don't want you around because you judge them, because you're too judgmental. That's the actual problem. Stop doing it. Literally, stop doing that. Stop. You are stunting your own growth. I get that growth is painful. And I get that you oscillate between fear and faith, but you need to have faith that you can withstand and you can endure the unfamiliar, especially unfamiliar social norms, unfamiliar traditions, unfamiliar customs, unfamiliar walks of life, right? Stop being socially racist. You people are socially racist. You do not get to choose what constitutes a social norm. Stop forcing it on everyone else, okay? Be open. Have an open mind. It's not hard. I promise you. If you do that, you'll have the greatest social life ever. You'll be invited to everything because people, especially the SE users, will see how you react and see how open you are, and they love that you're open to them. And then because of how open you are, then they'll actually ask you to share from yourself and share your customs and your traditions and share your comfort zone with them. And because they want you to share, you have that opportunity instead of you using your nemesis function to force yourself onto other people. That's the key, folks. That is how you have to do it as an ISFJ. That is the truth. So, anyway, folks, thanks for watching and listening. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.